Hi, this is Steve Hall. Thanks so much for checking out this first of what I hope to be a series of brief YouTube videos on the subject of Christian apologetics aimed particularly at high school students, although I hope it'll be interesting to everybody. For those of you who might be a little unfamiliar with that phrase, Christian apologetics, let's talk about that briefly. It doesn't mean Christians who are out there trying to apologize for what they believe. It comes from a Greek word, apologia, which simply means defense, as in defense of the faith. It's used by Paul, for example, in Philippians 1:17, where he says, I am set for the defense of the gospel. It's also the same word you see in the verse there on your screen from 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. So the plan is for this to be a series of videos for high school students to watch, hopefully as a group, where they can discuss the issues afterward. Now, I need to confess up front that I am definitely not what you might think of as an apologetics expert. Not at all. I've just read enough about the subject to help me personally try to be better equipped to obey the command in 1 Peter 3:15 on the screen there. And I'm just trying to share these points that are significant to me. If you decide you really want to get into it in kind of a heavy-duty way, you'll find much, much more out there. I also suspect that this word Veritas might be new to some of you, and maybe you're guessing it's a Greek word too, but it isn't. It's a Latin word, and it means truth. It might be of interest to you to know that the motto for Harvard University, the oldest university in the United States, is, guess what? Veritas. Of course, they established that as their motto many, many, many years ago when they still believed in truth up there. Actually, that's really not the whole motto. The whole motto is a Latin phrase that I probably can't pronounce very well, but it's something like Veritas Christo et Ecclesia. And that means truth for Christ and the church. Harvard's come a long way, haven't they? Now, the whole idea and the whole reason and basis for having a Veritas club is because there have been many, many surveys done of what happens to kids when they graduate from high school, when they turn 18. And the surveys consistently indicate that maybe 70 to 80% of them who are in church during their school years leave the church when they become 18, when they graduate. And it's interesting to think about that. I mean, I know that many of them come back, maybe in a decade, but many of them leave for a significant period of time, and many of them look back later with regrets for those lost years. It's good to think about why this phenomenon happens. Why is it that so many leave the church? And you might want to hit pause in the video right now and just think about that, talk about that. Why do you think so many young people leave the church? Well, there could be lots of reasons, lots of answers to that question. But I think one possible problem for many young adults is that they've never learned how to answer the really tough questions that unbelievers often ask. And one of the things that we're hoping the Veritas clubs can do is help students learn how to give a reason for the hope that's within them, to give an answer to those tough questions. So my hope and prayer is that you will pay very close attention and learn as much as you can as we discuss these different things to try to be able to understand better how to answer the questions. Why do we believe what we believe? How do we know it's true? We want to get answers to those things. Well, with that bit of introduction, let's move on to look at an overview of some of the things that I'm hoping we'll be able to cover in upcoming videos. We'll be looking at the biblical mandate, the biblical command, the instruction from the Lord to be able to answer questions, and, of course, to be able to do effective spiritual warfare. We've already seen a little of that. We're going to be exposed to some of the typical questions that some of the more militant, aggressive non-Christians tend to use to try to trap Christians. It's good for us to be familiar with those kinds of questions so that when we finally do see them or hear them, we'll be ready with an answer. We'll also look briefly at a very common, and very sad moral trap that traps a lot of young people, young adults, and causes them eventually to doubt God's Word. We'll talk about the importance of being able to stand alone. There are many times in life when it's important for us to at least have the mentality that we are willing to stand alone if necessary. We'll look at some common sources of authority. Every human being who makes moral decisions, and that's all of us, has a basis for those decisions. And that may change from time to time, but we'll look at some of those common sources of authority that people use to make decisions. We'll look at why some people are tempted to leave the faith. We've talked about that briefly. We'll look at the different kinds of skeptics out there, because not all skeptics are alike. And then we'll start spending a lot of time thinking about why we believe the Bible is God's Word. Now, of course, that can include its power to change our lives. It can include things like manuscript reliability, archaeological confirmation, fulfilled prophecy, the resurrection of Jesus, evidence for creation, and the effects the Bible has had on the world. All of these things are powerful evidences when you look at them very closely that convince us the Bible really is God's Word. The Bible really can be trusted. It's amazing. If you haven't studied this before, it's really amazing. We'll hopefully spend a little time studying some of the early church history. I think some of the problems we have today is because we're very ignorant of what happened after the Bible was concluded, and especially the early battles the church had with Gnosticism. And then we're going to consider some of the leading opinions about who Jesus really is. And I think you'll see that all of the opinions about who Jesus is are ultimately irrational except the truth. And finally, hopefully, we'll do some contrasts of Christianity with other major belief systems. That would be things like secular humanism, pantheism, and Islam. And I believe if you stay with us, you'll find that this is a valuable source of information that will help you get equipped to answer those questions.